Alright, let's face it, everyone is talking about how social media is going to impact the forthcoming elections, and that chorus has meant that whether it's true or not, it has definitely seen political parties rush into a no-holds-barred contest to dominate the digital space and influence opinion online, with funds being pumped to communicate and campaign extensively. So activists are now saying political parties should be accountable for these online expenses, just as they're accountable for the offline expenses, which has led to the Election Commission to seriously put on their thinking caps and see whether or not political parties and social media should be brought into the model code of conduct. But this is hardly as straightforward as it looks, and that's what we're discussing on the Social Network today. Election Commission to watch over social media. You can tweet us live at TSN on NDTV. And to talk a little bit about what all of this really means, we're joined by a very interesting panel today. We're joined by Dr. Qureshi, who's the former Chief Election Commissioner. He joins us from the capital. In the studio, we're joined by Ankit Lal. He's the head of the social media of the Aam Aadmi Party. And we're also joined by Virag Gupta, who's a constitutional lawyer. And of course, we have with us Nikhil Pava, who's the founder of Medianama. And on Skype, we're joined by Jaijit Bhattacharya, who is a cyber security analyst. All right, let's quickly look at what is the first thing that we're talking about. The first thing that we're talking about is, should the model code of conduct in fact apply online at all? Let's listen to what Om has sent us.
There is a need to set accountability of political parties who are spending lakhs and lakhs of rupees to promote themselves within social media. But at the same time, that sort of demanding that accountability should not come at the pretext of, come at the cost of rather curbing freedom of space, freedom of expression in social media.
Okay, so Virag, I want to start with you first, because you're the one who first started this whole thing about bringing it within the model code of conduct. Why do you think it should be brought?
We have given a legal notice to the Election Commission that as per Section 77 of the Representation of People Act, all the expenses toward election are to be aided, except then transportation expenses of 40 political party leaders. So social expenses are to be counted as per affidavit to be given by the parties. If any violation is there, then they are liable for offences, and their election they need to be disqualified. So it has to be counted. There is no question at all. There can be interpretation that how the model code of conduct will apply on the social media. But regarding expenses, law is very clear, and for the free and fair election, for the level playing, and for the enforcement of the maximum limit, it has to be enforced.
So you're saying basically expenses are incurred offline. If they're incurred online, then they should be accountable as well. And of course, the communication on social media is indicative of the kind of influence it has on voters. And of course, many people are talking about it. There are really no results as such. But I want to ask you, Jaijit, the offline space is certainly not the same as the online space. So can the same rules apply then?
No, Kashish, clearly not. The first part of it, we don't have a quarrel that the expenses must be monitored the same way that you monitor the offline expenses. But in terms of monitoring things like there should be silence for 8 hours before the actual elections happens, you cannot put that on social media for multiple reasons. The primary among them is the fact that there is no verifiable identity that you can establish on the net which is supported by any regulatory framework. So the presupposition that there is an identity based on which you can track people who are using social media for doing election activities is not possible at all. And in the absence of such a regulatory framework, it's a fallacy to believe that we can monitor the social network for any electoral activities, and therefore it will lead to a large number of litigations happening, and most of them will be very frivolous litigations, and the cost of that will far outweigh the benefit that we'll get out of this kind of a regime.
All right, it sounds like a bit like an unwieldy process, and that's what Jaijit is making the point of. Ankit, I'm intrigued by the stand that your party has taken, because one of the things that Aam Aadmi Party has done is really use the online space to campaign yourself and market yourself and reach out to the urban youth voter. But at the same time, you're supporting the fact that it should be brought under the ambit of the social poll code.
See, there are two aspects to this. One is the expenditure part, the other is the reach. The model code of conduct in itself covers both these.
Yeah.
So when it comes to expenditure, of course the parties need to be accountable what they are spending on social media. As per the influence part, in the last 2 days, the model code of conduct, the parties should not reach out to the people using paid means. These paid means need to be curbed. So any expenditure, any paid means in the last 2 days need to be curbed.
All right, but that may be technically far harder than it's sounding.
Not that much.
Okay, we'll come to that in just a bit, but also let's take a look at what the BJP has had to say on this.
BJP want to be very clear that we don't want to encourage any sort of censorship under the garb of monarchy. Secondly, one has to understand this medium. What is the expenses that can be attributed to a page, what is localized, what is not localized. The social media websites and pages have a reach beyond constituencies, beyond cities, beyond borders. Thirdly, we have not seen any guidelines so far, so we really cannot comment on them. But we would like to seek an all-party meeting and a fair and open discussion before any such guidelines are issued by the election.
As we saw during the recent Muzaffarnagar riots, how rumors were spread through social media that created attention in society, the social media, the virtual world, is a place where real problems can take place. Therefore, the Election Commission must regulate the social media, at least during the time of elections.
All right. Okay. So there's the other question now about should parties actually reveal social media expenses. I mean, that's one of the things that the Election Commission has been doing for quite a while, is to hold political parties accountable for the kind of funds that are actually spent on their campaigning and their elections. I just want to bring in Dr. Qureshi before we bring in a video blog. Dr. Qureshi, you've been listening to all of this conversation that's been happening about whether social media should be brought under the ambit of the poll code. What do you make of all of this, given, of course, that very, very crucial point about the expenses that Virag made earlier?
Kashi, there are two aspects of this debate. One is that the content. What should be the content of the social media, and the second is the expenditure. The fact is that social media is also media. Just as regulations apply to any other media through the model code and also the different laws of the land. Just because social media is a new phenomenon and there are no guidelines at the moment on this, it doesn't mean that there should not be guidelines in the future. Therefore, the proposal that the social media should also be brought on a par with the rest of the media, I think they are very valid. And if that happens, the second is the expenditure part, which also flows from the first argument. Just as your expenditure on print advertisement or television advertising or outdoor or any kind of publicity have to be accounted for. Therefore, social media expenditure should also be accounted for. I think these are two logical constructs. Okay,
Dr. Qureshi, I think I have Nikhil with me, who completely disagrees that both mediums are the same. Nikhil, you don't agree with him that both the media are the same, right?
Of course not. I mean, social media is just a phrase that's been coined for people to identify with it. But the internet is a medium for free speech. These are not media publications where you have a readership that is specific. Someone might have one follower, someone will have hundreds and thousands of followers, and this is free speech. You can't curb it. In terms of spends, I would agree there that parties that are spending money on promoting themselves on social media, that needs to be accounted for. But even there, it's tricky because there are people who support parties, and how do you identify who's paid and who's not in the first place?
Yeah. But I mean, at the moment, perhaps, Virag, you wanted to make a point?
On all the 4 points, what the BJP has said, guidelines are required, no guidelines are required. What Dr. Qureshi has said, it is already given in section 126 of the Representation of People Act, where it says any dissemination by any electronic media, and electronic media includes the internet also. So first of all, we should understand what is the law. And Information Technology Act section 4 says, and 126 of the Representation of People Act says, and what Ankit has said, that last 48 hours, so any official communication from the political parties has to come within the model code of conduct.
Okay, one of the people, I'm going to come back to you, Nikhil, in just a bit, but let's also quickly listen into what Ruben has sent us. He feels that this is a welcome move. Let's listen in.
EC's decision to extend the model code of conduct for elections to social media is a welcome one, because social media is really used extensively by people. The online presence in urban India is huge. But all said and done, they must implement it properly, because what we actually see is the Election Commission can't even implement the existing rules of the Code of Conduct. So it shouldn't really make the process more cumbersome.
Okay, so there is a bit of a fine line. All of these people who are talking on air right now are people who are active on social media. Many of them, of course, believe that political parties do need to follow a uniform policy. But at the same time, social media is certainly a completely different animal from the rest of them. Which really brings us to our third point, which is, will online anonymity then lead to the misuse of the poll code? And Jaijit, I know that you feel pretty strongly about the fact that this is something that's going to end up happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. social media is not the same as any other media. So I think legally speaking, what was laid out by Mr. Gupta kind of makes sense, but it's not implementable. The point is, how do you make it implementable? And if you try and implement it, it lead to a very Orwellian, draconian results coming out, where people will be hunted down online to say that they had done something which they perhaps would not have done. To give you an example, if you float a party, Kashish, and it's called Kashish Party, I can masquerade as Kashish and go online and put some things in, and then your candidature will get cancelled.
Okay, let me put that across to Dr. Qureshi. Dr. Qureshi, one of the biggest questions and one of the biggest challenges that social media and regulating and monitoring is going to face is how are you actually going to identify? I mean, I could put out a tweet from my account, and tomorrow if you were to hunt me down, if the Election Commission was to hunt me down, I could well say that, hey, I didn't do that, somebody else did it. How are you actually going to identify these people?
Absolutely. Kashish, there are 2-3 things which need to be clarified. One, that when Election Commission comes in, it is not there to regulate social media or any media. We are there only to regulate the political process, the election process. So to the extent that social media is used by the political party and the candidate, that is the only concern of the Election Commission, and not generally the freedom of expression and other issues for which there are other enough institutions which will take care of it. And you are right that the fact that it will be there will be difficulties in implementation, but that doesn't mean that we will not attempt to deal with those difficulties. There are difficulties in finding black money also in the election, but we try and catch, and we have various measures to stop all that. Yes, and anonymity actually makes it a very dangerous medium. And you are, as somebody very rightly said, if somebody pretends to be Kashish and comes up with a very libelous and very dangerous statement, so there are serious implications.
All right, I'm going to let Nikhil respond to that. Nikhil?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why is there any curb on mainstream media as well? I can understand curbing spends, but why are you curbing free speech or free reportage? This is not paid. So just as social media should be let to be free for anyone to say what they want to say, why is mainstream media even being curbed? I don't get it.
Okay, so here's, Ankit.
I think Nikhil has raised a very valid point in here.
Yeah.
In the last 48 hours, if a media channel reports something about a political party, that should not be under the Election Commission guidelines. Until unless it's paid, that only then it should be under the ambit of Election Commission. Otherwise, it should not be. The same should happen on social media also. If it's paid, it needs to be curbed. It has to be curbed. But if it's not paid, why any curb?
Regarding anonymity, we have suggested Election Commission that all the political parties and candidates must declare their social account, and from those authentic accounts any communication will be covered as per Model Code of Conduct, so that their anonymity and second aspect is there.
But Virat, would that not be a little bit of a conflict? Because while on one hand you could maybe look at the accounts of political parties, official accounts, but what about all the thousands and thousands and millions and lakhs of accounts that are influencing voters under the garb of being some other account?
There is a misconception that Model Code of Conduct applies to political parties and the candidates and those who and the election agents and those who are working for the political parties and the candidates. Regarding paid news, what the Ankit has rightly said, if anybody is using that medium indirectly, then that has to be counted. And regarding anonymity, one thing is very clear: Model Code of Conduct is not going to curtail the freedom of the common people. It is going to empower the democracy and the election system.
Okay, well, clearly there are lots and lots of little points. Ankit, you wanted to make a quick point?
Yeah, about the tech feasibility maybe?
Yeah, okay, so let's bring up the fourth and the final point for the day. Is it even technically possible to monitor social media? That perhaps is one of the big questions, and before I let Ankit respond to that, let's also listen into what Amitabh has sent us.
I don't think it's a good idea the Election Commission is trying to monitor social media for election campaigning, because they would need to have Facebook, Twitter and Google Plus on their board, and I don't think they really have much of a mandate to cover these companies. Secondly, social media works more like guerrilla marketing. You cannot really be monitoring something which is not controlled, which is organic, which is democratic.
All right, I think this perhaps brings us to the most crucial part. Ankit, how is it technically possible to monitor?
See, with just 44 days left for the elections, only very minor monitoring can be done. That also certain keywords, certain strings can be filtered out, nothing else. At this point of time, what we can do is ask the companies, maybe Facebook and Twitter, to give out the accounts of people who are...
That's going to run into trouble, Nikhil, isn't it?
No.
So I had 2-3 points around this. First is that, information online is forever. So if a speech was given, let's say 2-3 months ago, even when the code of conduct is applicable and no one's making speeches, anyone can still find them. So are you going to then shut down all reporters, all coverage online? It's not feasible. Online conversations aren't always campaigns, there is just a conversation. So that means that are you going to tell politicians that they can't use their personal Twitter accounts during that time? That's ridiculous.
Okay.
They can have a conversation as well.
Okay. Dr. Qureshi, this is probably going to be the hardest challenge for the Election Commission, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I entirely agree. There is a great problem in implementation of what we are talking about. And let me make it very clear once again that the Election Commission, when it comes out with any rules, it will only be with reference to the candidates and the parties, not in the context of any individual's freedom. Freedom of expression, by the way, also has its own limitations under the laws of the land, but that's a separate issue. Election Commission is not the custodian of public morals. But certainly what the candidates do, political parties do by way of their content and by way of their expenditure, that has to be monitored. If there are problems, the Election Commission will deal with it to the extent it can. Like we try to catch black money, but we succeed partly, we fail considerably, but so be it. But we keep trying.
Okay,
in the 1990s we started the election transformation process, and once we agree that this has to be implemented, there may be difficulty in implementation, but if you are not going to implement, then it will be great violation of Article 14 of the Constitution and lead to collapse of democracy.
Okay, Jaijit, are you convinced by what Dr. Qureshi said, that individual freedom of speech, etc., is not going to get compromised? They're only going to focus on political parties.
That's how it starts. It just starts with that one little reason why we need to monitor people and curb their privacy. My basic question is, what's broken that we're trying to fix? Can you give me a few anecdotal examples that things did not work out in the social media and there was a gross violation of the election code of conduct? Then we can start talking about fixing it. I don't see anything that has been broken, and we seem to be getting into a mode where let's just start doing this little thing, and then a couple of months down the line we'll have a whole bunch of draconian controls which will start creeping in, because we accept one control, then we accept another one, and so on. And that's completely against the spirit of internet. That's the last remnant where free speech is still available, and we're finding all kinds of excuses to muzzle that up, to beat that down. I don't think that's acceptable at all.
Dr. Qureshi, you want to respond to that? Many people have actually written in to say that the Election Commission has far bigger battles at their disposal. They have many more challenges offline that need far greater priority than looking at online, a space the impact of which has still not really been quantified. So why are we moving into that space which is huge, unwieldy, very difficult to make sense of so quickly?
In any case, Kashish, we are only speculating. Election Commission hasn't come out with anything at the moment, except that the Election Commission has been approached by various people, individuals and parties, that there should be some regulation. I'm just telling you from my experience in the Election Commission and how our mind works there, how the processes work, that if Election Commission comes into it at all, if it does, it will be from the point of view only of the candidate and the political parties. In terms of the hate speech and the content, which I have for me, there are lots of regulations of law and the model code, and also the expenditure control. After all, when you buy space on social media, Facebook and Twitter, these things don't come free. Individuals may communicate and chat, that is different. But after all, these companies are running on revenues only.
All right, Dr. Qureshi, but I suppose, again, like I said, one of the arguments that's constantly being thrown up is the fact that perhaps is it too soon for the Election Commission to be chartering into a territory that remains completely unquantified and, frankly, very unqualified at this stage. Many people are saying that we don't even really know what is going to be the impact of social media on the forthcoming elections, and it may well do the Election Commission well to perhaps discuss this a whole lot more, maybe wait for the elections to pass through, see what's been the impact, and then perhaps start picking up this topic again. Clearly, technically, it is going to be a very uphill task, but that's all we have time for. Thank you all so much for joining us today on the show. Come back same time tomorrow at 6:30. Goodbye.